Talk boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Word round the campfire seems to be that Germany's own Sarah Bormann will be taking on America's own Yadira Bustillos on May 13th in Germany for the interim WBC 105-pound title. Bormann, 15-0, the WBC mandatory challenger to Ruprecht.
Tina Ruprecht, WBC champion.
Is currently all tied up with Sinicia Estriada. The WBC have approved Bormann to face Bustillos for the interim WBC 105-pound title, while Ruprecht takes on Sinicia Estrada on March 25th in their unification match.
Bormann versus Bustillos is a fight of some significance, it is.
Whoever wins this fight becomes the mandatory challenger for the winner of that fight between Tina Ruprecht and Sinicia Estriada. Sarah Bormann, Sarah of Germany, an unbeaten up-and-comer who sports a professional record of 15 wins, no losses, and no draws with 7 knockouts.
She's been around a while, and she is a very formidable fighter.
Very good, and she will be sharing the ring with Yadira Bustillos, who sports a professional record of 7 wins with no losses, no draws, and no recorded knockouts.
None yet.
Having debuted as a professional in April of 2021, she only fought just once that year, turned around the following year, 2022, fought 6 times.
Busy schedule.
Which is ideal in the first few years of a professional boxer's career.
Yeah.
It is, but what that essentially means is that Yadira Bustillos has only been a professional boxer for roughly 2 years, just about 2 years. Sarah's been around a lot longer.
Sarah Bormann debuted as a professional boxer in late 2017.
That's saying that she's been a professional boxer for approximately 5 or 6 years, give or take, 5 or 6. She's a lot more experienced and a lot more seasoned than Yadira Bustillos, with more rounds in the bank, having seen action 2 times last year, once in May, then again in September.
She's a more maturated fighter than Yadira Bustillos, and even though she doesn't look it,
she's a whole decade older, a whole 10 years older than Yadira Bustillos. Sarah Bormann is a very spry 32 years old, whereas Yadira, she's a very fresh and fly 22.
So not only is Yadira a lot less experienced in the ring in terms of rounds banked, not only is she a lot less experienced than Sarah Bormann, she's a lot younger as well,
and not as put together. Don't misunderstand me. Yadira Bustillos isn't a bad fighter. She's a good fighter.
She's just green.
But she does have ability. Upon viewing the footage of Yadira Bustillos, she's got good combinations.
Good shot selection.
Good movement. Good upper body movement.
Good.
Decent feet, creating space between herself and an oncoming opponent, an aggressive opponent.
It's good.
Defensively, she leaves you wanting a bit. You could see where a more astute puncher, a more educated puncher might be able to capitalize.
Puncher like Sarah Bormann.
Sarah Bormann, who has stated, is a lot more seasoned, a lot more experienced, and, her base style, it's not hard to interpret. It's not hard to understand Sarah. Sarah is a mid-range to inside fighter, a close quarters fighter, a pressure fighter. Catch and shoot.
Coming in at a slight crouch, bending at the waist, high guard.
Stalking and effectively crowding her opponents, baiting them to throw, and then countering what they throw.
Forcing exchanges with pressure.
It's not a hard style to interpret or understand. Doesn't come with all the bells and whistles of, say, a pure boxer or a boxer puncher, but it's still very effective. Sarah's good at it.
She's good at applying pressure.
Yadira Bustillos being somewhat greener than Sarah, you could see how that constant pressure, more pressure than she's used to, from a better fighter than she's used to.
Remember, Yadira's only been a professional boxer for something like 2 years.
Just 2 years and 7 fights to the eye. Yadira Bustillos' punches are somewhat wider than Sarah Bormann's.
Not as defensible.
Sweeping shots, wide shots are easier to get under and or around, easier to counter, whereas Sarah Bormann's punches, they're shorter.
They don't have to travel as far.
That boils down to execution, that even if Sarah Bormann doesn't appear much faster than Yadira Bustillos, because her punches don't have to travel the same distance as Yadira's, because the punches are shorter, they meet the target faster,
and thus are simultaneously more defensible and more effective.
I don't think Yadira Bustillos is going to like the pressure from Sarah Bormann.
I don't.
I anticipate that she'll give up a bit of ground, trying to create space between herself and Sarah, try to counter in kind, but because her punches are wider than Sarah's, she'll get countered in between.
At just 7-0 with 2 years as a pro, it's safe to say that Yadira Bustillos has not yet shared the ring with a fighter, a puncher, as persistent as a Sarah Bormann.
That kind of pressure can cause even a very educated boxer to become flustered and start to lose form, start to take punches, start to take punishment. I give Sarah Bormann the edge here, unless we forget, it's going down. The fight's going down in Sarah Bormann's neck of the woods. It's going down in Germany.
She has the edge in terms of experience, a stylistic advantage, and home field advantage.
All she has to do is appear the busier fighter in the eyes of the judges, and for a fighter like a Sarah Bormann, that's right up her alley.
It is.
So I favor Sarah Bormann to win this thing. Sarah Bormann on points is the logical choice. I'm going with Sarah to move on from this fight and become the mandatory challenger to the winner of Estrada versus Ruprecht.
That fight is set to go down later on this month. This fight between Sarah and Yadira is supposed to go down later on in the year in May.
Sarah on point. Sarah Bormann is the pick.
In other news,
Head of the upcoming Tszyu versus Tony Harrison WBO interim title fight, which is right around the corner. Tszyu says he's confident that he will get the big KO of Tony Harrison.
do you believe that he packs a big enough punch that he can stop Tony Harrison?
I do. The caveat is that the same is true in reverse. I can't underestimate Tony Harrison, but with the way I've been training, I'm extremely confident that I'm going to give my fans a big knockout victory, said Tszyu. Full credit to him for taking the challenge and coming to Australia, but he's going home empty-handed.
We'll see about that.
It's exciting that my fans in the U.S. will be able to watch this matchup on Showtime. I hope they're ready to see a great atmosphere and a thrilling fight.
It's a great fight.
I don't think the U.S. fight fans would appreciate it as much if it were happening here in America as opposed to it happening over there in Australia, where Tszyu has a sizable audience. He's an established draw in the land down under. Here in America, great fight that it might be.
You wouldn't have got the same atmosphere for it.
Perhaps not even the same money in terms of ticket sales, and I do believe that this is a box office fight in Australia. I think they're billing this as a pay-per-view.
I think they are, but don't quote me.
If nothing else, the atmosphere for the fight will be better in Australia than it would have been in America, and we've been seeing a lot of that.
That's a good thing.
Last year, we saw Devin Haney make a similar trip to the land down under for the opportunity to become his division's undisputed champion. He did it 2 times, and it worked out both times. Tony Harrison, he's down there right now. Unless we forget, Stephen Fulton, he's set to travel to the land of the rising sun to take on Naoya Inoue. The fight with Inoue is a much bigger fight in Japan than it would have been in America. Fighters doing what they have to do to be involved in very big fights.
It's good for business. It's good for boxing.
Keeps the momentum and interest in the sport going and the money flowing. You have to strike while the iron is hot and go where the money is.
What Tony Harrison is doing.
Tony Harrison, who Tszyu says has better skills than Jermell Charlo. It will be a tough fight.
Tony Harrison did hand Jermell Charlo his lone defeat, a points decision loss, upset loss. Jermell was favored to win that fight, he didn't.
Tony won the first one and Jermell won the second one, but you could argue that he should have been down on the cards in that second fight at the time of the knockout, and he wasn't.
Boxing really good up until that knockout, facilitating the argument that maybe Tony is a little bit more skilled than Jermell.
Maybe. Tszyu, he views Harrison as the biggest test of his career and believes the former champ has better skills than Charlo, but the unbeaten Australian fighter expects to make a big statement when they meet in the ring. He looks fragile, Tszyu said to Daily Mail. I've been sparring big, strong, unbreakable blokes, and he looks like I could crack him in half. If it goes past 4 rounds, he'll be in trouble. My aim is to grab him by the neck and pull him down into the ocean and let him sink. That'll start from round 1, and we'll see when he wants to get air because he won't get any air.
As stated, I think Tszyu packs a big enough punch that he could knock out Tony Harrison, but I also think that about Tony. I think Tony packs a big enough punch that he could knock out Tszyu, at minimum drop him.
In a nutshell, I think that both guys could, in theory, take each other out. What's working for Tszyu here, it's not just the size of his punch, not just brute force per se, but the pace at which he fights. He does set a feverish pace for a fight. He's a pressure guy.
Keeps the pressure on and the punch is coming.
Tony might be able to keep him off early in the match while he's still fresh and still sharp, but as the fight wears on,
and his energy reserves wane.
what you gotta look out for. Harrison, is from the Crunk Gym. He's got a good jab and movement. He's slick and hard to hit. It's a different type of opponent to one I've ever faced. I'm not underestimating him. This is going to be a tough fight. He's got better skills than Charlo. He beat Charlo. Styles make fights. But just because you've got better skills doesn't mean you're going to win all the time. The bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. aim for the stars.
Tim Tszyu got very good experience from that Terrell Gausha fight. Terrell Gausha, he's not the carbon copy of Tony Harrison stylistically, but there are similarities. They're both more boxers than punchers.
They're both more back foot boxers than front foot brawlers.
Tim's got to wear him down.
Tony is noticeably taller than Tim Tszyu, noticeably longer as well. He's going to try to maintain distance between himself and Tim Tszyu.
He is.
In hostile territory.
That's working for Tim too, you know.
He's got home field advantage. He's got that working for him. And you know what they say? You don't coast on foreign soil. That's where Tony Harrison's feet are currently planted. If he spends too much time moving and not enough time punching, not enough time fighting, he'll lose the rounds for that alone.
Let's not pretend that home field advantage isn't a real thing. We all know that it is.
People gathered to see this fight, to watch it happen. They're not there to watch a game of freeze tag. You know, you've got to inflict some damage on this guy while moving lateral or boxing off the back foot.
You have to.
Tack on that Tim Tszyu is a characteristically aggressive fighter. Aggression, the judges will likely favor that. He's going to keep the pressure on Tony Harrison, who's likely going to fight on the fly, fight on the move, round after round. That does wear on your energy reserves.
I mean, more than just brute force, more than just punching power. That's yet another aspect of this fight that Tim has working for him. He's got a good engine, sets a feverish pace.
What punches get through are going to have an effect, and what punches you try to get out of the way of. It all costs energy.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. Everything costs something.
Moving around and trying to stay out of the way of punches, that costs energy too.
Tim Tszyu said that Tony Harrison looks frail, looks fragile.
Tony Harrison, being a defensive specialist, he makes it his mission to hit and not get hit. So even if he does look fragile, you'll have to catch him.
Keep the pressure on long enough that he slows down, because if he doesn't, you're in for a rough night.
It's a good fight, and we'll talk more about it as the fight date approaches. It's right around the corner. And finally, in men's super lightweight news, unbeaten up-and-comer Arnold Barbosa says, if Josh Taylor isn't healthy, Teofimo Lopez will have the advantage. In more ways than one, because now the fight's supposed to happen in New York, where initially they said it was going to happen in Josh's neck of the woods.
Not anymore.
Arnold Barbosa, 28-0, will be one of many interested observers of the fight. He has been very vocal over the past couple of years of his desire to face Teofimo Lopez or any of the top contenders in the division. I think if Taylor comes in 100% healthy like he was against Jose Ramirez and Regis Prograis, he wins the fight. But I heard he's not 100% healthy, so I think Teofimo will have the advantage under these circumstances, Barbosa told BoxingScene.com. Barbosa, who like Lopez and Taylor, is promoted by Top Rank, just fought in February when he defeated former two-division champion Jose Sniper Pedraza in Arizona.
It's Arizona.
Arnold Barbosa is raising a valid point, a point I've raised here on the channel several times. There was a time when I would have heavily favored Josh Taylor to beat any version of Teofimo Lopez.
It was.
Especially today's version that's been looking less than spectacular. But Josh himself has been looking less than spectacular. You know what they say?
What?
You're only as good as your last fight. And Josh Taylor's last fight was the Jack Catterall fight.
The one everybody thinks he lost.
That's why Arnold Barbosa and many others are raising these very valid points. The 31-year-old Southern California native reiterated his desire to take on Lopez or any of the best in the division. Of course I would fight the winner. I want the winner of the fight, or any champion, or any big name at 140 pounds.
If the winner of the fight is Teofimo Lopez, I think he'll fight Jose Ramirez before he fights Arnold Barbosa.
If Josh Taylor wins, because Josh Taylor already beat Jose Ramirez, maybe Arnold will get the fight. The question is, who's going to win?
As stated, there was a time when I would have heavily favored Josh Taylor and pretty much any solid 140-pounder to beat Teofimo Lopez, because Teofimo, while formidable as a lightweight, he's really not that big a guy as a super lightweight. And there are some big kids up there at 140 pounds. Strong ones.
Josh Taylor, Subriel Matias, Regis Prograis.
Arnold Barbosa. Not the biggest puncher per se, but a naturally bigger guy than Teofimo Lopez, and his ass has been snapping at the grass to get a Teofimo Lopez fight.
Naturally bigger guy, taller guy. I remember after the Masayoshi Nakatani fight, Teofimo Lopez stated in plain English, he doesn't want to fight any more tall guys.
Taller than him.
There's a lot of guys taller than him at 140 pounds. Arnold Barbosa's one of them.
Josh Taylor is another.
The fight between Teofimo and Josh. It's an excellent fight. It's an intriguing fight, and it's an intriguing fight not because of how good both these boys have been looking, but how bad You know, Teofimo didn't look great opposite the ring, Sandor Martin, and as stated, Josh Taylor didn't look great against Jack Catterall, and because that's the last time we've seen the guy, even though it's been a long time since that fight, he hasn't quite been able to put distance between himself and that performance, because that was, in fact, his last performance. There was supposed to be a rematch. He suffers another injury. He's experimenting with a new trainer. None of it is particularly encouraging.
He didn't get to put distance between himself and that performance because even though a lot of time has passed, he hasn't fought since then.
Teofimo Lopez, comparatively, he has been somewhat more active than Josh Taylor, but he didn't look good in his last fight either. That's a part of what lends itself to the overall intrigue of this fight.
I want to say that what seemed to have troubled Josh Taylor the most in that Jack Catterall fight, what was his last fight, was the judicious jab from Jack Catterall. He kept it out there, kept using it.
Josh Taylor couldn't stay out of the way of that thing. I happen to think that Josh Taylor's movement was hampered in that fight because he was coming off a knee injury or a leg injury of some kind. He wasn't quite able to throw those leaping uppercuts and leaping hooks.
Couldn't move as well as he normally does, so he kept getting caught with the jab.
And here once again, ahead of this Teofimo Lopez fight, he's coming off of some kind of leg, foot injury of some kind, the kind of injury that could once again hamper his movements. I think the silver lining for Josh is that while Jack Catterall was able to consistently nail him with the jab, Jack is a southpaw like he's a southpaw, whereas Teofimo, he's an orthodox fighter.
He leads with the other hand. That changes things.
That in tandem with Teofimo not being all that big a jabber, Teofimo's more a counterpuncher. He either waits for an opportunity
to land big, land hard,
or he'll try to set the guy up, but he's really not that prolific a jabber, not that prolific a puncher. He doesn't throw all that many punches in a round.
So you gotta think about that.
Josh Taylor's a southpaw, naturally bigger guy than Teofimo Lopez, and in this fight, unlike the previous fight, Josh Taylor won't be opposite the ring a southpaw.
Teofimo Lopez will, and the last time we saw Teofimo Lopez in there with a southpaw, didn't look good. The Sandor Martin fight.
Sandor's a southpaw the same way that Josh Taylor's a southpaw, though they are very different fighters. Sandor's a far more defensively minded.
More defensively minded than Josh Taylor. Nowhere near as aggressive and come forward as Josh Taylor.
He is a southpaw. Like Josh Taylor's a southpaw, they have that in common, and you have to wonder if the angle of attack might fluster Teofimo Lopez, having to share the ring with yet another southpaw.
It's almost a generic statement to say that if Josh Taylor's 100%, he wins the fight. But it is true, and I think that that's the feeling across the board. If Josh Taylor can go back to being the guy that he was with Regis and the guy that he was with Jose,
he should win the fight. However generic and generalized that statement might be, it is true.
There's some truth to it.
Josh Taylor's won fights on the road before. Can he win them again?
There's only one way to find out.